Good day. Today we'll be discussing about operating segments under IFRS 8. So we will have our discussion through these main topics about definition, its recognition, measurement, and those important highlights. So first with the definition, under operating segments, it's important to note that it involves or it engages in business activities. So when we say it engages in business activities, there must be revenue generating activity for certain component of a business for it to be under these standard operating segments. Another thing to note is that it is reviewed by the chief operating decision maker. So the chief operating decision maker, through the inputs being relayed upon him, since operating segments is somehow an internal based measurement. So the one who oversees that the measurement is reliable or somehow accurate, it's the role of the chief operating decision maker, or we call it in its acronym CODM. Another thing to note is that there must be an available or discrete financial information. So discrete meaning it's capable of being separate, or there must be a separate financial information. Let's proceed with the recognition. For the rules for its recognition, there are two things to note. First is the quantitative thresholds. So, under the quantitative thresholds, there is our golden number, that 10%. So, we have 10% tests for the series of items. First is about the revenue, second is for profit or loss, and the third one is asset. So first, let's start with the revenue test. So for it to be considered as a reportable segment, its revenue should be greater than or equal to 10% of the total revenue from the combined, or in relation to the combined revenue of external and internal. So that's for revenue test. For profit or loss, its its profit or loss should be equal to 10%, greater than or equal to 10% of the higher between profit or loss. For the third one, asset test, still asset should be greater than or equal to 10% of the total assets or the combined assets. So remember our quantitative threshold. So aside from the quantitative threshold, there is also our aggregation criteria. So items with similar economic characteristics, similar nature of products and services, similar nature of production processes, or same class of customer and distribution methods are being aggregated into one single operating segment. For our measurement, the one thing that we need to emphasize is that it uses the management approach focus, or its focus is from what management sees. So, as what I have stated earlier, the CODM manages the measurement of securing that the measurement of operating segments are accurate. So, the basis reported to the CODM is what is the amount being reported for the operating segments. And there are also reconciliations to entity totals required because, as what I have explained earlier, operating segments are basically internally produced financial measurements. So there are instances that it may vary with the standard applicable for other items. So it is important that there are reconciliations for the totals. And last one is that it is consistent identification across periods. So what are those important highlights that we need to remember for operating segments? The overall size test. Remember the quantitative threshold, the golden 10% threshold for revenue, profit and loss, and asset. If those items are under the reportable segments or can be identified quantitatively as part of reportable segments, the next question to ask is that if it satisfies the overall size test. So what does the overall size test tells us is that it must be 75% of external revenue. So it or the qualified revenue qualify for it to qualify or to for it to be disclosed. So it's important that the company must comply or reach the 75% external revenue threshold. So in instances where there are informations considered non-reportable, it is being aggregated through all other segments category. So that's the rule there. Another important highlight is that a major customer should be disclosed if it constitutes a revenue greater than or equal to 10% from the combined external revenue. So it is being disclosed as a major customer. And of course, the disclosure of nature and the financial effects. If if it is being relevant. So again, that is our discussion for operating segments. Thank you very much for listening.